I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Season 8, Episode 17 of Music is Not a Genre. Let's do it, MxG. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening. This week's topic, the visuals, Part 1, album art. It's a pretty special episode, kind of all the way around, and I'm going to explain why as we do this intro. But again, yes, thanks for watching and listening. Like, share, subscribe, rate, review, etc., etc. The mid-roll is where you'll find all the other information, how to support this show, and my band rec and all of that stuff. So as always, please stay tuned for the middle of each episode, each major episode, each main episode. Now, any episode that has a number is, like Season 8, Episode 17, it's going to have a mid-roll. And it's important to me, as it is important to all indie creators. So please take a look and a listen to that. And that's all I'm going to say about that, because, as I said, it's a very special episode. And this week's topic, again, to repeat, the visuals Part 1, album art. So this whole thing just kind of came, it didn't come out of nowhere, because I did plan to do this episode, but it cropped up at a time where I didn't think I was going to do an episode, because I batch cooked a bunch of episodes and bonuses and things like that, and was going to take a few weeks off. But I felt compelled to do this for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't want to get rusty, because that does happen. But two, I didn't realize how important this is to me. It's something I really probably should have realized, but that idea that, and here's what it is, visual portions of music are, to me, an essential part of the listening experience. And I do not mean music videos. I've done an episode on music videos and whether or not they're important, etc., etc. You can be the judge of that. Please go look it up. YouTube.com/@musicisnotagenre. And I'll tell you why I'm sharing that link specifically a little bit later on. But I've never done one on album art. And I was going to do this episode on the whole thing, the whole schmagegi, album art, band logos, and the whole thing. But I realized as I was writing and researching, there's way too much information to do all that. Now, you could say that about anything. I mean, every episode I do generally can be probably parsed out and broken down into 10 separate episodes if you really did deep research and things like that, which, if you support the show, patreon.com/music is not a genre, there's no at there, then that kind of research can happen. But for the time being, I do what I call surveys, which is 1 hour-ish episodes of a topic that cover everything about that topic, and then give you enough information to kind of go on if you want to do a deeper dive. And so in this case, this is strictly on, and specifically on, album art. Now listen, I've always been a fan of the visual arts, both in and out of music. I love going to museums. I studied art to some degree in college. I have been a visual artist. I've been a graphic artist for my entire life. And how the visuals of a release, the cover, what's inside, inserts, the back cover, can summarize the music and even give it more context and meaning, has always been a thing that has thrilled me. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that listening experience that we all used to have with physical media, and that we still to some degree have with even digital music. And, I've been a decent photographer, not as good as my wife, who is an amazing professional photographer, Catherine Lynn. And like I said, graphic designer. And every album, every single that I've ever released has had artwork designed by me. Also, and this is something to keep in mind, especially for you people watching, and I'll explain why that's kind of important to you listeners out there for this episode, if you haven't already guessed, I am wearing a shirt from my store, nickdimatteo.com/shop. It's my peace shirt. It makes a statement about peace. In the second half of the episode, I'm going to be wearing a different t-shirt, just to give you a sense of what is at nickdimatteo.com/shop, because this is how important graphic arts are to me, and visual arts and visual art in general. So keep that in mind as we do this episode. And we're going to get there in a second, but before I get to the show format and the disclaimers and all the rest of the stuff, I need to immediately give you some advice. I don't care from episode to episode, whether you listen or watch. That's your choice. If you are more of a listener, go for it. It's streaming everywhere. If you're more of a watcher, go to YouTube, do that. I understand that. And I do the same thing. I mainly listen, although now and then I do watch certain podcasts when they have a video component. But for this one in particular, my advice to you is watch it. If you're listening right now, go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre and watch the episode instead. I will even provide a link to the specific episode link in the text wherever this is streaming so that you can do that. And of course, you may guess the reason why I would want you to watch it instead of listen is because I'm talking about album art. And I'm going to show all of the album covers that I talk about in this episode. Now, if you're just listening, you're still going to get a lot out of it because I'm giving you a lot of information. I'm giving you a lot to go on. You can go ahead and research any of the things I talk about and, look them up in 1 second on your phone as you're listening, and you'll get to see those album covers. So the listening experience can still be really fun. I've done that for certain episodes of podcasts where they're talking about something visual. But again, you want to make it easier on yourself and you have the space to do it, go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre and watch this episode instead. That's my advice to you for this. So let's get to it. Show format. I'm going to do the history of album art and cover art in general. Notable album art by decade. So from the 50s on up until today. A note on inserts and packaging, which could have had its own episode. So many of these topics could have. Conclusions. The featured not song. Usually I do a featured song. This time I'm doing featured art. I'll be displaying every single one of the covers I've designed for the music that I've created, and giving you a link to where you can go hear that and see the covers again. Especially if you're just listening, you can use that link. And then, of course, questions. At the end, I always like to ask you questions. And don't forget the bonus MXtra at patreon.com/musicisnotagenre. Man, this was fun. Band album art. I talk about tons and tons, decade by decade, the album covers and back covers, and in some cases inserts that were censored or banned throughout the ages. And that's at patreon.com/musicisnotagenre. Sources here: Google, Wikipedia, The Syncopated Times, The Ephemera Society of America, ragpiano.com, thecreativehagja.com, that's thecreativehagja.com, and the Vinyl Factory. Just some disclaimers. Of course, it'd be impossible for me to mention all the great album covers in 1 year, let alone 1 decade, and really let alone every single decade of the last century or so. Maybe not quite a century. So I'm being choosy, of course, as I have to be in all cases in this podcast, in a way I hope is educated and represents different styles and genres, different visual styles and different music genres. And the second disclaimer, you visual artists out there, you fellow visual artists, I'm not doing deep dives into the specifics of the art and style and the layout and how the composition and all of that and the aesthetics, because it would take way too long, and I'm far from the authority on being able to talk about all that stuff. And this is a music podcast and not a visual art podcast. But I will mention certain characteristics from time to time where they are germane or German. No, it's germane. So that's the intro. Let's get into the history of album art. So to get to the true history of album art, you have to go back to before albums even existed, before even recorded music existed, and start with 2 things: sheet music and books. Written music has existed since at least 1400 BCE on a stone tablet, but this isn't a history of that. I've done that before. Side note that the first book cover known about is the Diamond Sutra from 868 AD, and became a more regular thing, of course, in the mid-late 1400s with the printing press and all of that stuff. So we know that books existed before 868, but they didn't have covers that we know of. The first known book cover was the Diamond Sutra from the 9th century. Printed sheet music has existed since the 1400s, the way printed books have. To the best of my knowledge, it was just the notes and the words, when there were words, with some flourishes that amounted to a bit of illustration, maybe on the margins and things like that, or for the name of the song or the composition, which is just to say that the idea of art accompanying music has been around for a long time. But cover art for sheet music, which we can safely say is the origin of album cover art, because sheet music was the origin of the music industry as far as being able to sell something physical. That cover art for sheet music has been around since the 1600s, and of course became more prominent as the centuries progressed and printing became easier and cheaper and all of that stuff. So when 78 RPM records replaced the cylinder in the very early 1900s, at a time when sheet music was still far more popular and affordable than recorded music, these early records, these 78 RPM records, had plain brown paper sleeves. They had no covers, like what you might find inside of an album, covering the disc. Or if you go to patreon.com/musicisnotagenre and check out the bonus MxG, I'll talk about how those paper sleeves made some big comebacks when certain things needed to be censored. By the 1920s, albums were compiled and sold, and of course, if you check out my previous episode from a couple of years ago on albums, and it was, I believe, the first episode of my albums series, and it talked about where that name came from, that it was like a photo album, but instead of photos in there, it was a booklet containing a bunch of 78 RPM records, collection of discs in the form of an album. That's where the name comes from. Still no cover art, though, at the time. Nothing to speak of. It was just a box that contained the music. It wasn't until 1938 that album art became a thing, starting with Alex Steinweiss being hired as art director for Columbia Records. He's credited with the idea of adding art to the plain album covers. And again, thinking of this in this era, the album was thick. It was a booklet with paper sleeves where you put the 78 RPM, so it was like a photo album. He put art on that. His first design was for Smash Song Hits by Rodgers and Hart. Was it Smash Song Hits or Smash Hit Songs? Anyway, probably Smash Song Hits. It was a photograph of a theater marquee displaying the album title, which he asked the theater to do. It and others like it for Columbia were a success sales-wise, more so than the ones that didn't contain art, so other companies followed suit, and through the 1940s, most album collections had cover art of some sort. And then once the album, as we know it, now we're talking about the 33 1/3 LP, vinyl, came along in 1948 and beyond, with 45s and even box sets of 45s soon following. Again, check my episode on all this history. I've covered all of this in other episodes. Cover art transferred from the thick album, the original format, to these new formats, especially the 33 1/3, and we've never looked back. Which brings us to the covers themselves, and this is notable album art by decade. So, big note for everybody on YouTube. And again, if you're just listening, youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre, you can see every single cover that I'm talking about. It's going to be an editing nightmare, but I'm going to do it for you and for my own satisfaction. Instead of my usual fading in and out from a cover, to me, like when I cover an artist, when I go over an artist's discography and I'm talking about a specific album, I will fade to blue, and on top of that blue will be the album cover. And then I fade back out and talk about it, blah, 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 because there's a lot of time to talk about it before I get to the next album. That's not the case here. Those of you watching, take a good look at this face, which, by the way, burying the lead, this is maybe the only or one of the only episodes in which you will see me with a beard this year, because it's winter and things are slow gig-wise. So I thought, why not grow a beard? I'll shave it for my next gig. And so, yeah, that's the headline. I guess I buried that. But you won't be seeing much of it, those viewers out there, because once I fade to blue for a decade, I'm going to stay on that blue for the entire decade and just let the album covers roll by. and you'll hear my voice, and you get to stare at the album cover for as long as I'm talking about it, which I think is a better idea here. When I break for the next decade, I'll fade back to me, set up the decade, and then I'll fade to blue again. So that's going to happen from the 1950s on, because the transitions would be way too short and frequent for me to keep fading in, fading out, fading in, fading out. All right. Keep in mind that I'm highlighting only a handful of covers in each decade, as I mentioned, hopefully a range of stylistic examples, and that there are far more to explore. And I guarantee you there will be some I leave out that you would want me to cover. If so, comment or reach me in some way. Let me know what covers I missed that you think should be included as the best covers of the decade, and I will mention them in a future episode. And despite me being selective, you're still going to hear about over 100 album covers. And again, you'll see them all on YouTube. As with all of my chronological histories, the real talk starts in the 1950s. Sometimes it's the 60s. You know, we make allusions to the 1920s. We podcast historians or whatever, musicologists, because recorded music, even though it didn't start then, that's when it really took off, etc. But as far as the modern era LPs and such, it's really the 1950s. So, the 1950s, subtle representation. I'm going to kind of characterize each decade with a two-word heading. As we've learned from other of my histories, the 1950s was a transitional decade for music formats, in that the LP and 45s took pretty much the entire decade to finally take over the market and eventually phase out 78 RPMs. And labels were still figuring out how to shift to these new formats, how to design them, and how to capitalize on their growing popularity. So the truly iconic covers of the 1950s didn't really start until a few years in, is what I'm saying. Whereas in other decades, if I, when I do the 60s, it's going to be 1960 or 61 is when I start. But in this case, I am starting with the first album I'm covering here in the 1950s, and goodbye to my face and hello to all the covers I'm talking about for this decade. 1955's In the Wee Small Hours by Frank Sinatra. It has a moody and cinematic cover, just like the music itself. The cover, as well as the music, help to define the idea of a concept album. And I've talked about this in previous episodes. Art director for this was Voyle Gilmore. Photographer was William Claxton. 1956, and you cannot leave this one out, Elvis Presley's debut album. It's iconic. Not just the music, but the cover itself. The designer is uncredited. The photographer is Red Robertson. It's often imitated cover, most notably by London Calling by The Clash, which I will talk about later. It proves how a simple design can make a huge impact. And of course, if you don't know it, you listeners, it's got Elvis on the left side going down and Presley on the bottom, going across in two different colors, and then I believe a black and white photo of Elvis. It is severely iconic. 1957, Monk's music, Thelonious Monk, of course. The designer was Paul Bacon. It's both playful and serious. It captures his intelligence and the deceptive simplicity of his playing. How does it do that? It's him sitting in a red wagon, in a kid's-sized red wagon, crouched in there, with a baton or was it a pen or something like that, and music, and you see like handwritten things on the side. It's meant to be kind of informal. And again, that childlike simplicity that Monk was always deceptively creating in his music. He's always been one of my favorite jazz pianists. 1958, Julie London, London by Night. Designer Bill Pate, photographer Garrett Howard. You can hear the city sultry coming off of this cover. It's I think one of the quintessential 1950s covers, and definitely deserves to be on this list. It's her and a marquee and things like that, and cool font. It's funny. I'm not staring at the visuals here for the things I'm describing. I'm just going off my notes. So if I mess something up, it's right there on the screen. You're looking at it right now. Speaking of 1958, Come Fly With Me, again, Frank Sinatra. It's kind of the polar opposite of the 1955 cover in the Wee Small Hours. It's bright and happy. It's also hand-drawn, keeping up that incredible 1950 streak of great albums with great covers. This marries the swinging lounge aesthetic with the increasingly affordable jet-setting travel lifestyle. The illustration was by Johnson, and it's as much as I could find out about that. But the cover art was Marvin Schwartz. Maybe the idea for it was Marvin's. 1959, The Country Blues of John Lee Hooker. Designer Harris Lewine, Ken Braren, Paul Bacon, again, big one. Leaning into the idea of blues being a rustic backwoods genre, even though it was always far more wide-ranging and cosmopolitan than that, but very effective. It has that kind of backwoodsy feel to it, the visuals. And then rounding out the 1950s, because again, there weren't as many to choose from here. 1959's Kind of Blue, Miles Davis. Shouldn't be left out of any list of the 1950s, but even with the visual arts. Art director Neil Fujita, photographer Jay Maisel. A leap forward in design that really captured the minimalist, mysterious, moody essence of both the music and Miles Davis himself. I can see his face from memory, even though I'm not staring at it right now. And that's the 1950s, everyone. Hello again. My face is back. I know I haven't shaved in the meantime. We're going now to the 1960s. Concrete abstraction is what I'm calling that decade. This is, as I said in my album series, when the album came of age. So naturally, album art also came of age. There are far too many iconic album covers in this decade, so I will miss a ton. I'm trying to lump a few together because some were kind of an either-or choice. You have to let me know the ones I missed out that you think are just heinous oversights. Let me know that. But I think this is a pretty fair representation of the decade. Starting right smack with 1960, the Kingston Trios Sold Out. I couldn't find the designers, but it turns out the woman in the cover is the same model in another 1960s album cover we'll get to shortly. This is a mix of casual, homegrown, polished, self-aware that more or less defined the Kingston Trio. We get to 1963, the freewheeling Bob Dylan. Dylan and Suze Rotolo in the Village. That's a photo of them. Photographer by photo by Don Hunstein. The epitome of 1960s folk, urbane, personal, off the cuff. 1963 and beyond. This is when it gets kind of thorny. It's hard to say that any Beatles album was a failure or bad, but some clearly rose far above. And those of the mid-1960s were almost all iconic. Each cover captures exactly where they were at the time, which can't be said for every band, but I think that's what a good cover does. And I'm going to name a few here, not all of them. And again, you can look up and tell me if you think I left out ones that you thought deserved to be here more than others, because there's one or two that are probably controversial. 1963 with the Beatles, that half shadow black and white shot of their faces done actually impromptu in a hotel hallway with natural lighting. Robert Freeman is the photographer and would work with them throughout. Accessible mystery is how I describe this one. In 1964, Hard Day's Night, playful shots like in a photo booth or the kind of proof shots you get from a photo shoot. If anybody out there who's an actor who's done photo shoot for any reason, we still get these digitally, but we used to get physical copies of proofs, which were just strips of small versions of the photos before they printed them up big. Again, Robert Freeman is the photographer, black and white again. 1964 Beatles for Sale. You might be surprised that I include this on here, but for some reason, the more I look at this cover, the more it's captivating to me. And again, it's a Robert Freeman photograph. It's the tired-looking foursome in a rustic autumn setting, which really befits where they were at the time. In 1965, Help for the movie. The fake semaphore, not really spelling help. It was real semaphore, but spelling out help didn't look as good as whatever random stuff that they did. So they kept that instead. Again, Robert Freeman, photographer. 1965, Rubber Soul, Robert Freeman. It was an accidentally peek at a stretched and skewed photo that they loved so much they wanted to keep it that way. And then that rounded lettering by Charles Front is, I mean, Rubber Soul might be at the top as far as an iconic Beatles cover. And I know what you're going to say, but too bad. Also, that kind of iconic font of Rubber Soul leans into the next episode in this series, which will be in a few weeks, and that will be on band logos. And sure, this isn't a band logo, but the idea of a font being stylized in a way that makes it distinctive for art, we're going to get into that in that episode. Quick mention, by the way, of the Baby Butcher cover of the U.S. album Yesterday and Today, which was the first cover to be banned and replaced. And you can hear more about that cover in the bonus MXtra, patreon.com/musicisnotagenre, in which I'm talking about band album art. 1966, Revolver. It's a Klaus Vormann drawing and collage. Very experimental cover befitting the content of the album. And of course, 1967's Sgt. Pepper, blah, blah, blah. You know the rest of the title. Peter Blake and Jan Hayworth. No, I'm not going to talk about this in detail because that would take a separate episode. I know people have done entire episodes on parsing out all of the people who are in this cover and how it came together and all of that stuff. All I'm saying here is that it is, of course, iconic. May, for many people, be the most iconic cover of the 1960s. It spawned many imitators, Frank Zappa being the most notable. And it's staring you right in the face until we skipping an album to the White Album, The Beatles, 1968. Richard Hamilton's minimalist design, something that influenced me greatly, and we'll get to that in the conclusions when I go over all the art for the albums that I've designed. Their shift away from trippy to simple, their statement that they could do anything as well and didn't need to make it flashy and it would still sell. And it did. 1969, Yellow Submarine, geez, awesome trippy cartoonage by Heinz Edelman. We know that style was in the culture at the time, but was most popularized by Yellow Submarine, and it's a style that people have gone back to time and again since then. 1969, again, Abbey Road. It's hard to deny that Abbey Road's cover is one of the most iconic as well. Some people may consider it even more iconic than Sgt. Pepper's because it's simpler. It's designed by John Kosh, photographer Ian McMillan. There were no words in the cover, and the photograph took like 10 minutes to do. They went outside of the studio and did it, and they're done. So that was a rundown of the Beatles covers that I like a lot. Not that I dislike any, but I like those a lot. Continuing on with the 1960s. 1966, The Psychedelic Sounds of the 13th Floor Elevators, the first explicitly psychedelic album cover. John Cleveland did it. Electric colors, flowing lines with dots, all making a trippy eyeball. Love it. I love eyeballs. 1967, Cream, Disraeli Gears, designed by Martin Sharp, with a photo taken by Bob Whitaker. Another hugely psychedelic cover that, again, very nicely matched the band's sound on this album. 1967, Jimi Hendrix, Are You Experienced? Carl Ferris's Fisheye Lens. And or Axis Bold as Love, David King and Roger Law's Hindu God Pastiche, both mixing psychedelic elements with different kinds of exotica. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Axis Bold as Love in the bonus MXtra, patreon.com/musicisnotagenre, because there was some controversy. 1967, Velvet Underground and Nico, Andy Warhol's Banana. Iconic, high concept abstraction of the object that is both the album and the band's music and the band itself. This is a banana. This is the band. Simplicity. This is music. We're not going to overproduce it, etc. 1967, The Who Sell Out, another pop art moment, also by David King and Roger Law. Photos by David Montgomery. The band selling oversized products like baked beans and deodorant. 1968, Small Faces, Ogden's Nut Gone Flake. It's another kind of product shot. It looks like the tin of an old-timey tobacco tin, round. It's round-shaped, and it's a parody of Ogden's Nut Brown Flake tobacco. Designed by Nick Tweddell and Pete Brown, illustrated by Harry Willock. 1968, Rolling Stones' Beggar's Banquet, Tom Wilkes and Michael Vossi. Photo by Barry Feinstein. Toilet Graffiti that Jagger and Richards did was rejected and replaced by a white invitation-style cover with an RSVP. I'm going to talk about this more again. Bonus MXtra, patreon.com/musicisnotagenre. In 1969, to sort of round out the 60s, in The Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson, it's that iconic screaming face close-up of the schizoid man, which was painted by Barry Godber. Not for the album. I believe that was some painting that they loved. I'm pretty sure that's true. Now, fading back to me, I have a note here that says, tell me which ones I left out that you love, because I'm sure there were tons. I'm pretending I'm one of you because I realize I left out that Herb Alpert album with the bubbles and the woman should be on this list because that's a pretty damn iconic album cover. Forgot it. So that's on me, and you don't get to see it, and I will, talk a little bit more about it in a future episode, I suppose, if you'd like me to. We're going to get to the 1970s and beyond, but first let's take that. Let's dive into the 70s a little bit. 1970s, functional surrealism. The 1970s in general, Led Zeppelin, another one of those bands like the Beatles, whose art started out kind of just fine and then became iconic and then kind of just became okay again, which I would say characterizes the Beatles' art as well as Led Zeppelin's art. We're going to do Led Zeppelin and then take a break, and that is starting with Led Zeppelin 4, which is the Zoso album, as people say, with the four, symbols symbolizing the band members. In 1971, it's a photo from 1892 by Ernest Howard Farmer of a man carrying sticks, chosen by Jimmy Page. The Zoso symbols were done by George Hardy. It's hanging on a wall with peeling wallpaper, rustic. 1973's Houses of the Holy by the iconic British design group Hypnosis. Almost did a bonus on them because they deserve their own episode, but look up Hypnosis, Hypgnosis. A collage of children, models Stefan and Samantha Gates clambering over the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, done in blown-out pastels. This was partially censored, so again, go to the bonus MXtra, patreon.com/musicisnotagenre for more info on this. 1975's Physical Graffiti, which may be my favorite Led Zeppelin album cover, a shot of 9698 St. Mark's Place in New York City in the East Village, which is the site now of Physical Graffiti, TEA. It's a tea shop there in that building, which I'm going to go to soon. It's the same damn building. Pretty much looks the same, too. You could slide the inner sleeve in and out to have different people appear in the windows. This was designed by Peter Karsten. Not the first functional, because the Sticky Fingers, Rolling Stones, had a zipper, a functional zipper. There were more, too, besides that, but that was a prominent one. 1976's Presents. Again, Led Zeppelin, a conservative 1970s family, a wife, husband, boy, and girl sitting at maybe a restaurant table with boats docked outside, staring at an obelisk centerpiece with smiles, inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey. Again, Hypnosis, and that's, I think, iconic. And I'll do one more because I just mentioned it. Doy for me, 1971 Rolling Stones, Sticky Fingers. Andy Warhol. It's a man's crotch close-up with a working zipper design done by Craig Braun. And I think that man's crotch visual is the perfect place to take a break right here and check out the mid-roll, and we will be back in a minute or so. Hey, MxG fans, thank you as always for watching and listening. Listeners, go to youtube.com/@musicisnotagenre. You get a video for every episode of this podcast. Watchers, go to nickdamadio.com/musicisnotagenre if you would rather just listen. And everyone, please take some time out to go to patreon.com/musicisnotagenre to support this podcast, my band rec, and everything I do for as little as $1 a month. Speaking of everything I do, nickdamadio.com really does have it all. If you're interested in unique and quirky t-shirts that I've all personally hand designed, go to nickdamadio.com/shop and you can find it all there, including discounts if you sign up for my newsletter or Patreon. If you're someone who's always wanted to write a song, has just never figured out how to get there, let me work with you. I am the Song Coach. Go to nickdamadio.com/thesongcoach, and whether you're a complete beginner or completely advanced, I can get you there. You can book a free 30-minute call right there on the site. And of course, I am always releasing new music. Go to nickdamadio.com/music to find it all. My complete discography is there. All of the social links are there. And of course, please like, share, subscribe, rate, review. Do it for the podcast. Do it for the music. Sharing is especially valuable to all of us indie creators. I really appreciate your support, your eyes and ears. Thank you for hanging with me for this mid-roll, and let's get back to the show. All right, everybody, we are back, and I realized I may have kind of screwed myself on time with this episode, but I don't care. I'm having a great time. I've got a lot more information to impart here. Sticking with the 1970s, Fade to Blue, 1973's Dark Side of the Moon, again by Hypnosis. You got to look up that collective. Illustrated by, again, George Hardy. So another, force in album covers. It's that iconic triangle rainbow prism on black. Hard to deny its significance. Plenty of t-shirts. And one of the few album covers that probably almost anybody can recognize, even if they haven't heard the actual album. A side note, by the way, that I'm saving Roger Dean, for those 70s fans out there, for part 2 of this series, because although he did design many album covers, it's his logo work that stands out the most. And even though I love album art and art in general, logos may be even more of a favorite for me. So stay tuned for that in a couple of weeks. 1973, Bowie's Aladdin Sane, photo by Brian Duffy and makeup by Pierre Laroche. Lightning bolt on Bowie's face with no shirt. Damn iconic as well. 1974's Queen 2. Great moody theatrical shot of their heads in a diamond formation on black background. Photographer and designer Mick Rock. 1975, Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. Black and white photo. Cut off to the left. Springsteen leaning on Clarence Clemens. Photo by Eric Mayola. I believe in New York. 1977, Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. Designed by Desmond Strobel. Photographer Herbert Worthington. Stylized photo of Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks, on a tannish background that to me perfectly encapsulates their music. That's all I'm saying about that. 1979, the aforementioned London Calling by The Clash, designed by Ray Lowry. It's rare that, and this was the imitation of Elvis's debut album, it's rare that an imitation of an iconic cover itself becomes iconic. This rises to that. The smashing guitar and all of that. 1979, Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures. I mean, this probably and Dark Side of the Moon are probably the two most well-known 1970s album covers. How many people own this t-shirt but maybe never heard the music? Some probably have. It was designed by Peter Saville, one of the greats who designed so many great covers. It's white on black. It's a photograph. It's a color-inverted image of radio waves that was originally just black waves on white. He inverted it. And, I mean, I love it. I'm not going to wear the t-shirt because everybody does, but I love the album as well. 1980s, I'm calling... Oh, hello. See my face. Yes. Getting into the 1980s, which I'm calling Universal Personality. Like with every series I've done, the further up in time we go, the more there is to cover. So to keep this wieldy and hopefully not too long, I'll continue to do my best to whittle down the list. Starting 1980 with Talking Heads' Remain in Light. Red splotches on their faces, big ones covering them. Letter A's in the name turned upside down. Just weird enough, which kind of encapsulates their music. Designed by Tibor Kalman. 1982, Duran Duran, Rio, their breakout album. Illustrated by Patrick Nagel. Postmodern fashion, Art Deco, minimalist drawing. Woman with short hair, very just saying, big statement, this is the 80s, and new wave music is also about fashion. 1982, Roxy Music's Avalon, smoky, moody art designed by Peter Saville, again. Photographer Neil Kirk. Model and girlfriend of Brian Ferry, Lucy Helmore, I believe, wearing a medieval helmet and holding a falcon. Just mysterious enough. 1983, New Order's Power, Corruption, and Lies. Again, Peter Saville. It's an 1890 painting, A Basket of Roses by Henri Fontaine-Latour, mixed with modern color coding strip on the side there in the top right. To me, this cover is a coded message that they have fully emerged from the punk, post-punk darkness of Joy Division. There's a, thing about flowers in punk thrown to the ground. That's sort of an image of punk. And these are beautiful flowers. So it's sort of saying we're rising from that. 1984, Purple Rain, Laura LePluma, designer. If you don't know it, It's staring in the face, but look it up. Mix of masculine and feminine, mix of street and mythic, larger than life. 1984, Bruce is born in the USA, pretty iconic. His butt in jeans with a red ball cap in his pocket and on a white tee, working man. Partial USA flag as a backdrop. 1986 is Beastie Boys' License to Ill, the famous 727, illustrator World B. Ohms with David Gambale, art direction by Stephen Byram, more aspirational for the Beastie Boys than we realized they would absolutely achieve those soaring heights. And I think anybody can remember this cover. 1986 Metallica, Master of Puppets, cross tombstones under a blood red sky, painted by Don Brautigam, designed by the band and manager Peter Minch. Ominous and incessant, like their music. 1987, U2's Joshua Tree, the legendary Anton Corbijn photographer who still works with them. Their recent EP, which I loved, Days of Ash, I believe, he did photos for that. American Minimalism, and it was designed by Steve Averill. Americana Minimalism, really. 1988, Public Enemies, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. Photographer Glennie Friedman. Chuck D and Flavor Flav, Behind Bars, Flav. Seminal cover. By the way, Chuck D designed the Public Enemy logo himself. So yay, people like us who design our own logos. I love his mind. And that's the 1980s. Sure, I left out a lot. Tell me what I left out. 1990s. Aggressive Indifference. Bye again. 1991, Nirvana, Nevermind. The Underwater, Baby, Chasing a Dollar Bill. Designer Robert Fisher. Photographer Kirk Weddle. Subversive commentary on chasing the almighty dollar, but also kind of non-commentary, that kind of, again, like aggressive indifference, like whatever. 1991's My Bloody Valentine's, Loveless. Pinkish, reddish, blurry, abstract screenshot from a video taken by Angus Cameron. Art direction by Kevin Shields. Unbelievably perfect for the music and way to announce that shoegaze has arrived. 1992, Dr. Dre's The Chronic. Designer Kimberly Holt. Photographer Daniel Jordan. Perfect branding. It's an homage to Zigzag Rolling Papers, but also it mythologizes Dr. Dre and kind of formalizes and saying, I am an authority. 1993, the Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream. Kind of in-your-face impromptu nostalgia. It's two little girls next to a chair, but the way they're doing it, it's almost like nostalgia, overblown, with tension is what I would say. 1994, Green Day's Dookie. Iconic. By the way, I'm going to be listing all of my favorite album covers from each decade in the conclusion, so stick around for that. Weed Punk Illustration Extraordinaire by Richie Bucher. Bucher, not sure how, maybe it's Butcher, I don't know. But anyway, I mean, the detail in this is fun. 1994, Nas's Illmatic, iconic. It's him as a child, picture of him as a child over a Queensbridge city block, kind of faded in the back. Designer Joe DiDonato and photographer was Danny Clinch, I guess for the city. Personal and stark, raw and composed. All those contrasts there. Chiaroscuro. 1994, Sunny Day Real Estate's Diary. Artist is Chris Thompson. It looks like the Little People toys, but they're in a stark kitchen with hardly anything in there, with a toaster burning. There's like smoke coming out of the toaster. It's shadow mostly on one side, sunlight coming through the door on the other side. To me, it seems like it's people trying to be happy in the face of life's normal frustrations, maybe. 1995, No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom. Designer Morbido Bizarro, which I believe is a collective. Photographers are Daniel Arsenault, Patrick Miller, and Shelley Robertson. It's Gwen Stefani up front and the band members in a wasteland-looking orange grove. Kind of 1930s, 40s framing and letters. 1995, Radiohead, The Bends. So this is a mini section, as I've done with each. I didn't do it with the 80s, but I'm doing it with the 60s, 70s, and now the 90s. It's the first of many collaborations by Tom York and Stanley Donwood, the designer an artist. A photo of the CPR dummy from a TV screen. Looks like it's either in distress or in ecstasy. Just kind of perfect, again, for frickin' Radiohead's music. And they would go on to collaborate on all the rest of Radiohead's covers, including the ones I'm mentioning here. 97's OK Computer, Fragmented Digital Alienation, Disjointed Highway. 2000 Radiohead, Kid A, Dystopian Digital Abstraction, Stark Bleak Apocalyptic Mountains to start the millennium. And then following year, Amnesiac, Drawing of Crying Minotaur on red background. Such a cool contrast to Kid A. 03's Hail to the Thief, color-coded grid-based collage of words, both messy and OCD. So anxious. 2007's In Rainbows, one of my favorites, as if the album name slowly dissembles and becomes the band name, on top of a kind of a vibrant toxic sludge thing. 2011, The King of Limbs, chaotic, surreal trees with eyes and limbs. And 2016's Moon-Shaped Pool, abstract marble art, weathered, which is also the last Radiohead album that's come out 10 years ago. Back to the 90s, 1996, Metallica's Load. It's an Andres Serrano picture. Looks like a mix of blood and phlegm and semen, frankly. Hard to forget and was controversial. Andres Serrano was someone I've known for a while because he did in the 80s a sculpture called Piss Christ, which I believe was like a crucifix, floating in pee. And, there was a reason for it, and I loved it, and I still love it. And, of course, people got upset. 1998. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Designers Brett Kilrow and Mark Brown. Burned wood portrait representing neo-soul classicism. 1999, Blink-182's Enema of the State. The fantasy nurse, who was the adult film star Janine Lindemulder, getting ready to do something unpleasant with a glove. Designer Tim Stedman. Keith Tamashiro. Photographer David Goldman. Completing the full disillusionment and disconnection that this decade slowly engendered, I think. So it's a perfect way to end the 1990s on a photo like this. So much in contrast to me, to My Bloody Valentine, and yet of a piece in some way with Nirvana Nevermind starting the decade, even though the thing they were commenting on, I think, was a lot maybe less serious. I don't know. But let's get to the next decade, 2000s, Connective Detachment. That's what I'm calling it. So right at the beginning, Outkast Stankonia, the duo in front of a black and white American flag with inverted stars, designed by Mike Rush, photographer Michael Levine, sociopolitical statement, boom, right there. That is the, flag of Stankonia, I guess. Stankonia. 2001, Andrew WK, I Get Wet. It's a close-up of his face with the bloody nose and the blood running down his face. Photographer Ro Etheridge. It was blurred on Safe Search, which is ridiculous. And even though I don't mention this because then when I'm saying blurred and Safe Search, meaning I freaking just looked this up this week, and Safe Search blurred the photo, which I clicked off. It's just dumb. I don't mention this in the bonus MxG on patreon.com/music is not a genre, but I do mention digital censorship. Same year, 2001, The Strokes, Is This It? Close-up of a leather-gloved hand on a naked woman's hip. Photographer Colin Lane. And you're saying, what? No, it's not. Why? Because that's not what you're seeing on the screen, and it's not what I remember. I own the CD because the US version used an abstract particle image. And I talk about it in the bonus, but I also talk about how it's the better image, honestly, of the two. 2003, Metallica's Saint Anger, a red fist punching down, hand-drawn fist, scrawled album name, illustrator Brian Pusshead Schroeder, designed by Metallica and Brad Clausen. Underrated album to me, underrated art as well. Memorable art. 2004, Kanye West's The College Dropout, mascot branding extraordinaire. The bear, the cute stuffed bear, cutesy but clever. Designers Eric Duvauchel and Kanye, Say Adams as well. Illustrator Sam Spratt really set up the next few covers for him and became iconic. and captured the moment so well. 2005, Gorillaz' Demon Days, one of the most important covers because it's kind of one of the only ways the quote-unquote band exists is by these illustrations. Comic artist Jamie Hewlett, co-designed by Damon Albarn, and I mean, they went on to a career, didn't they? They just released an album or are about to. 2006, Amy Winehouse, Back to Black. Photographer Misha Richter. Designers Alex Hutchinson and Mark Porter. Retro soul, elegant sexiness. 2007, MGMT's Oracular Spectacular, really capturing the decade shift to softer, more psychedelic electro indie pop. Photographer Sam Fleischner. Art direction Josh Schuss, I guess. Whimsical photo of the two guys on a dusky beach with some, weird clothes and I think no shirts maybe, with computerized MGMT running down the middle. So nature mixed with digital, but in a weird way. We take covers like this for granted now, but this was, I think, ahead of its time. 2009, rounding out the 2000s, Animal Collective's Merriweather Post Pavilion, another album I own. Optical Illusion. Designed by Rob Carmichael. It's like one of those ones you see in a book where it's like, figure out what this is. I don't know if you're supposed to figure it out or not. I haven't tried. But it's something called the principle of illusory motion, based on academic research by Akiyoshi Kitaoka. It's trippy, it's experimental, but also concrete, just like the music. That's the 2000s. 2010s, off-putting intimacy. My two words are always contrast. You see, we're going to start right in. So goodbye again. 2010, Kanye's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. The last album of his I actually bought, even though I've listened to other things. By fine artist George Kondo, who created several paintings, including a band cover, which I'll talk about in the bonus MXtra at patreon.com/musicisnotagenre, and the one we know of a ballerina with a like a martini glass with cherry juice. It's inset on a stark red background, very distinctive, memorable. 2011, James Blake's eponymous debut. A photo by Erica Wall, designers Will Bankhead and Alexander Brown. It's a blurry headshot of his head going side to side, blue-toned and minimalist, captures the minimalist, kind of swirly one-man electronica that he does perfectly. I commissioned from my wife, Catherine, the amazing photographer, a series of blurry photos of my head on a black background that I have used for various singles covers, which you can see nickdamadio.com/discography. You can see a couple of those if you scroll down to the singles. 2012, Grimes, Visions, which she created herself. She drew it herself. It's intense. It's insular. It's a black and white drawing. It's very DIY, or mostly black and white. Matches her one-person, deeply chaotic efforts to a T. 2013, Beyonce, eponymous, designer Todd Torso and Sam Hine. It's just her pink name on a black background. It's kind of two things to me. It's the minimalist inversion of Purple Rain's gender duality, because it is, stereotypically masculine with its terse statement and black background, but also feminine with the coloring of the letters, but also it's simple but equally mythical. And it also sort of presages like, Brat, Charlie, which I'll talk about later, very soon, actually. 2013, Yeezus. Hate to keep bringing up Kanye, but this transparent CD case cover, which represents the death of the CD, was about as timely as you can get in 2013. Designer Virgil Abloh. I love this cover. 2014, FK Twigs, LP1. So again, here's a little mini section that I've done for some of these decades. Every cover deserves a mention. Such striking visuals with everything she does, including her mini canvas videos, her actual music videos, all the art contained for any single thing that she's ever done, all very striking. It was designed by FK Twigs and Phil Lee. The imagery is by Jesse Conda. It's a bizarre painted face, kind of like an abused porcelain doll. And I'm going to stick with her for a while, again, because all of her covers deserve mention, but I'm mentioning a few here. 2015 Melissa EP, that her hand fading into the face with the mouth on top of the hand is like soft, but also unsettling. All of her imagery is unsettling. It's just amazing. Designer Matthew Stone. 2019's Magdalene, also designed by Matthew Stone. She is deconstructed and digitized in disturbed ways. It's probably her most iconic cover. Although, run for its money, 2025's Eusexia, stark, aggressive, vulnerable. Designer Ben Gans. Photographer Jordan Hemingway. Again, always compelling. Look up her art and beyond the ones that I'm showing you here. Let's get back to the 2010s. 2015 Tame Impala Currents, designed by Robert Beatty. Transitional digital flow patterns, so much like the electro psychedelica of the album. 2015's Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly, designer Vlad Sepetov, photographer Dennis Rorv, group celebrating on the White House lawn. It's an image of black community, also commanding American space. So a statement for sure. And a lot of emotions in there. 2016, Frank Ocean's blonde, raw, intimate photo of Frank with dyed hair and his hand over the face by Wolfgang Tillmans. Perfect representation of this iconic album and the artist. 2019, Tyler, the Creator, Igor, designer Louis Rossignol, hard and dirty and weird and bold and bright photo of Tyler that you have to see to understand, if you can even understand it then. All of Tyler's art is as compelling as FKA Twigs' art. I love his covers. This one is probably the pinnacle of that, though Chromacopia from the recent album comes very, very close to being just as good. And that's the 2010s. And yes, we are going to do the 2020s so far, and I'm calling it Meaningful Monochrome. So starting right out, 2020, Taylor Swift, Folklore, indie folk grayscale minimalism signifying a pivot from the mainstream, which is why it's significant, because it captures what she was trying to do in this album. Photographer Beth Garabrandt, creative direction by Taylor Swift. Tame Impala pops up again, same year, The Slow Rush. Photographer and art director Neil Krug in collaboration with Kevin Parker, the T.I., is what his name is. Actual photograph of the inside of a building in a ghost town in Namibia being taken over by sand. Surreal and dreamlike lighting and its singular pink-red color. It's a human space being subsumed back to nature. Epitomizes both the album title, The Slow Rush, and the mix of surreal and concrete that is Tame Impala's music. Oh, Kevin Parker is Tame Impala. That's why I said the T.I. I'm sorry. I don't know my own notes. Hi, everybody. 2021, Olivia Rodrigo's Sour. Designers Liam Walsh and Dina Hovsepian and Olivia herself. Photographer Grant Spanier. It's a DIY zine-style pop-punk revival with stickers on her face with a solid purple background, the perfect amount of kind of laid-back rebellion. 2021, Billie Eilish, Happier Than Ever. Conflicting reports about who photographed this. Was it Craig McDean or Kelia Ann McCluskey? I don't know. Soft-focused, retro, but also emo. Vulnerable, but also guarded with the arms. Kind of a tan monochrome background. You can 100% guess the sound of the album from this, I think. Or at least 80%. 2022, Kendrick Lamar, again, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Could have mentioned any of his albums, but the two I'm mentioning I think are significant. Underrated album, because we know that GNX is an amazing album, but everybody kind of skipped over Mr. Morale. I loved it. Photographer Renelle Medrano. It's an intimate, this is a quote from Wiki, I believe. Intimate photo of Lamar wearing a crown of thorns, holding a child, and having a gun tucked into his waistband, conveying themes of responsibility and trauma. As complexly straightforward and deceptively beautiful as his music. 2022, SZA's SOS. Talk about isolation. It's her, very small compared to the expanse of the ocean, sitting on a diving board. It's an homage to a Princess Di shot. Photographer Daniel Sanwald, designer Victor H. It's sublime. 2024, I mean, the entire episode could have been about this. Charlie XCX's Brat, the pinnacle of monochrome. They took a long time to pick the perfect amount of green that is both inviting and off-putting. Designer Brent David Freeney. It's low-res boldness, meant to be again, bring you in, but also be off-putting, which is perfect. And finally, 2025, Bad Bunny, Debí tirar más fotos. Photographer Eric Rojas, directed by Bad Bunny. It's just plastic lawn chairs in front of a banana tree. Nostalgic, personal, speaks of Puerto Rico, empty and bittersweet as well. Retrospection. And that's my run of amazing covers out of the shadows of blue here. We're going to get to the next section. Again, tell me what I missed. Please do. Next section is an insert on inserts and packaging. So any of you remember that emotional connection that you'd get when you would get a new album, whether you were old enough to remember vinyl or even cassettes and then certainly CDs, that you would rip it open immediately if there was, take the plastic off, whatever, and you'd have to be looking at the artwork while you were first listening to the album. And if there were lyrics, all the better. And all of that art mattered and still does. That's why I'm doing this episode. There's an emotional connection to it. For many of us, the albums we love the most, we can picture their covers. Art on the LP sleeve has been around since at least 1940. So these are parts of art in the packaging that aren't the cover itself. So the LP sleeve has been around since at least 1940. Again, Alex Steinweiss for Smash Hits from Rodgers and Hart. Same with art on the vinyl label. Though this didn't really take off until the 1970s. Some albums had a little bit of art besides words on that central label in the vinyl, but in the 70s they really started to blow it up. Gatefold covers, which is of course it's not just one sleeve, it's two, sometimes for double albums, sometimes just for extra effect, and it allows for more art, more words. They've been around since at least the early 1950s, but really took off by the end of that decade. And then, of course, we get to cassettes, and those inserts are called what? J-cards. They're shaped like a J. They were introduced with cassettes in the mid-1960s and slowly emerged as a place for art. No one ever thought that the cassette J-card was the perfect place for art, but I still enjoyed them because some of them you can fold, unfold, unfold, unfold. They were tightly folded, and there was so much in there, and lyrics and stuff like that, and other photos. I designed some like that. Lyric inserts, starting with Sgt. Pepper, have been huge for listeners. I remember Purple Rain's lyrics being gigantic for me and wondering why they didn't have those reverse words listed on there. Stickers and other smaller floating insert type things. Again, Sgt. Pepper kind of started this, but it became huge in the 70s and 80s. A booklet, specifically with photos and liner notes. Again, Sgt. Pepper started this really magical mystery tour, though, really kicked it off. And I think of things like one of Pearl Jam's albums that the entire booklet was just photographs. And I loved it. I loved the whole packaging of it. Art on the actual vinyl itself, the first picture disc, as is known, was apparently Curved Air's Air Conditioning in 1970. CD inserts in art were the easiest to mimic albums because of the shape, and that started in 1982 with Billy Joel's 52nd Street. Keep in mind, too, that non-cover front or back art was a good place to sneak in more subversive images and messaging, though even some of that was banned, and I'll talk about that in the bonus MXtra at patreon.com/music is not a genre band album art. Non-plastic CD packaging started more or less in the early 1990s. Sting was one of the first with the Soul Cages in 91. CD tray art didn't really emerge until the 1990s when clear plastic became more common than the kind of black or gray plastic that would be in the CD tray. So then you could see through it, then you could have art. First online thumbnail was again Sting, 10 Summoner's Tales in 1993, and of course we exist by album cover thumbnails now and singles. There are now several websites that feature high-res images of all the art in an album as opposed to just the thumbnail, and you should look up those sites so you can absorb the art in the ways that we used to, or if you never did, get used to it because it's wonderful. A couple final words. One is we didn't discuss all the great art on the backs of albums. Often it was just echoes of the cover, but sometimes it was alternate takes or images that further fleshed out the art's meaning and intention, or the lyrics were on the back, but back cover meant a lot too. And the final word here is that none of this addresses box sets, which that deserves their own episode for so many reasons. I've actually been planning to do one on box sets for I don't know, 4 years, 5 years now. So I don't know. Conclusions. Do great albums make the cover art seem greater? I'll tell you what, there were covers listed online that I didn't think were that amazing. The ones that people said were iconic, but it was, to me, more the music that was iconic and not the cover. And so I didn't put them in this, but you may disagree. There were highly iconic albums whose covers were listed that I didn't mention, because if you imagine those covers on an album of crap music, they wouldn't stand out at all. So some of them were Stones covers. Thriller, I didn't include. Let's Dance, I didn't include. The albums, amazing. Covers, That means there were, of course, tons of albums on the other side of that divide that were obscure and or not great music-wise, but possibly great music, but obscure, but whose covers were masterfully designed and they just didn't make an impact. I'd love to hear about those from you. Meaning most of the ones I did mention were at the nexus of well-known and well-designed. The absolute greatest thing anyone can say about an album cover is that it captures both the music and the essence of the band and artist at that point in their career. That just looking at the cover, you can guess what the music will sound like. Bottom line is visual art has been all over music formats since the 1930s, even before with sheet music, and thus has almost always been an important part of the experience, one we still rely on to some degree whether or not we think about it. Brings me to my favorites from each decade. 1950s, as much as I love and respect Elvis's debut cover and the quintessential 50s looks of Sinatra's covers, I have to go with 1957's Monk's music, him in the red wagon with the handwriting. I love it. 1960s, my favorite. I love the Who Sell Out and all the psychedelic stuff is up my alley, but to me, it's got to be a Beatles cover. And like my favorite albums, my favorite Beatles cover changes. Right now, I believe that my favorite covers would be Rubber Soul, Abbey Road with the Beatles, and the underrated Beatles for Sale. 1970s might have been the toughest choice of all for me. It's a three-way tie between London Calling by The Clash, Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures, and pick a Led Zeppelin album, really, but right now I'm going to say Presence. It was just creepy and funny enough. 1980s, toss-up between New Order's Power, Corruption, and Lies and the Beastie Boys' License to Ill, both simple and effective. Though my heartstrings will always be plucked by Purple Rain, I don't think it's as well designed a cover as those two, because they were much simpler and more impactful, but I got to put it on there. 1990s was another toughie. I can't get Sunny Day Real Estate's Diary cover out of my head and love it and have great respect for The Chronic. My three-way tie here is Nevermind, Dookie, and The Bends, Radiohead, although you could pick any Radiohead cover. In the 2000s, these are my three: Gorillaz' Demon Days, Kanye's College Dropout, yes, and Metallica's Saint Anger. I would have said Is This It by The Strokes, but since the cover was a replacement, I sort of it's a gray area. You could put it on the list because I do love that abstraction. By the way, bonus extra, patreon.com/music is not a genre. I'll talk more about that. 2010s, three top, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, again, Kanye. FK Twigs LP1 is my favorite of hers, and Tyler's Igor has to be on there. 2020s, Tame Impala's The Slow Rush. Even though I should listen to the album, I never heard it. I love the cover. Olivia Rodrigo's Sour, and Charlie's Brat, of course. But let's not forget that some of my true favorite covers are my covers. So since there is no featured song, consider this the featured section of the episode and its featured art. Here are all of my album and EP covers from the first one I deliberately designed up to Rex's most recent album, Kite to Camden. Doesn't include the dozens of single covers I've designed or covers I've designed for other projects like film soundtracks. And it does not include the logos, which will of course be featured in the second episode in this series. The first, Fade to Blue, is Your EP, which was my first release officially under the name Nick. Very clear choices there. I did something slightly stylized with the name and all of that, and the hand over the face that's inside in the J card, but the writing on my forehead was actual Sharpie. Not Listen You People was my first full album. Titles matter. This whole package was meant to be back to basics, like it's me sitting in the woods with bare feet, straightforward, no nonsense. Just listen to the music kind of thing. My shirt is on backwards because there was something on the front I didn't want. What it is, my first design triumph, also my first producing triumph, minimalist white with a blue line down the middle, font that I created called Nick Scratch, for the circling it and all of that stuff. Simple, linear, connective, like the music, hand drawn but also digital. The Metro Grand Sessions, meant to evoke 1970s album Swirly Browns, absolutely inspired by Stevie Wonder's covers. And it was the final iteration of Nick as far as new music until very recently with Valley of the Unreleased coming up this year. And it's the first time I ever designed tray art. Clear to Sunrise, not my finest hour as designer. It was a greatest hits of Nick prior to me abandoning that name, but it got the job done. It shows all the releases that I put under that name and, which songs from all of those releases are included on that album, as well as some live stuff. Then Rec's first album, Parts and Labor, the magic recording box with the big red button. It's not the first version of the Rec logo, but the first Rec release that had a logo on it. Lots of Easter eggs on the front, back, insert, and tray. I spent tons of time designing this. The fold out has a different illustration for every single song. And the back is fun. It's circuitry. Distance to Empty is another EP, clear car reference. You see the speedometer there. So double meaning, empty, the car would flash the words distance to empty or whatever, would show you how many more miles you had to go. Also emotions at the time of recording this. How long did I have before my emotions would empty out? It's the first use of this grainy overlay I've been relying on quite a bit ever since. The Sunshine Seminar, full album, overblown happy yellow with a screaming face kind of hidden in there. That's me. This shot is looking south on Lenox Avenue from the 140s in Harlem, where I lived, at the Empire State Building. Ironically, this shot was taken at night, but meant to look like day, so it's struggling to find the light. The Sunshine Seminar. The Weird Objective. What you're seeing is the quote-unquote box set version of the 4 EPs in one album that I released all together as The Weird Objective. All 5 have different names with slightly different covers, and the differences are on my cheek is a different tattoo, and the featured artist is different, the font is different, things like that. Little stylistically different things, but the same photo of me in the studio. It was an experimental project. Studio rat I am. I wanted to show me in the studio, and befitting shades of studio experimentation. If I were to remaster these, which I may re-release them at some point, I'd tint each one of the 5 slightly differently. Long Held Grudges. My other artist named The Drop, where I do instrumental music and cover music and things like that. Droplets of water on a window, with the song numbers in the droplets and also smiley faces and middle fingers. The title font is meant to be ironic. Rec Collection, Best of Rec. Plastic wrap, meant to evoke actual physical releases of the 4 albums this covers, even though I only physically released one of those albums. It Wasn't Me. Compilation. It's the face palm close. Actually, it's just the hand close up, just the palm, kind of tying it back to a shot I did in the insert in your EP. So full circle. And it's meant to be, no, it wasn't me, because these are covers and things I did for other projects. 9695, which is a reissue repackaging of your EP with an unreleased EP called Standin' There. It's meant to look like those 2 cassettes side by side. Kite to Camden, manufactured colors over nature, obscuring nature and industry. Exactly like the music. It's a mesh of Camden, New Jersey and Camden in London. The icons are meant to evoke clickability and accessibility and also abstraction. Bright colors and me running with a kite. And that kite was I put in post. Rec, the singles collection, which is something that will be released on streaming very soon, probably by the time this is out, meant to mimic all the number 1 albums like the Beatles and Elvis. And for them, it was number 1 hits. And for me, it was singles. So a little joke there. And I'm currently working on a design for Valley of the Unreleased coming out later this year. Click on nickdamadio.com/discography. That's the link to my discography to see and, of course, hear all of these. And if you scroll down that page, you can see all the single cover designs, which I take a lot of pride in. Very fun. Please take a look also at my designs on nickdamadio.com/shop. Like the shirt I am wearing. There are 2 stores to choose from at that link. The main merch store on the left, featuring all of my designs in many different cuts and colors, hoodies and long sleeve and short sleeve. And the right side clicks you to the Spotify store, featuring select designs with slightly bigger and different layouts and colors, so you can choose what you like best. Either way, your purchases help support this show and my band Rec, and you get some cool shirts. Questions? Are you into album art at all? Hopefully. You've been gone this long. Do you remember how checking out all the art was a necessary fun part of your first listen to a CD, cassette, or vinyl? And what are some of your favorite album covers of each decade and of all time? I'd like to know the answers to all these because, as always, my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you for hanging with me for this slightly longer episode, and I will talk to you next week.